From our State House studio in Montgomery, I'm Todd Stacy. Welcome to Capitol Journal. Today was the 19th day of the Alabama Legislature's 2025 regular session. That means we have just 11 meeting days left between now and mid-May. And today was Military Day here in the Alabama Legislature. Per tradition, the House and Senate held a joint session where members from both chambers gathered for a program honoring the United States military and celebrating the large military footprint we have here in Alabama. Installations represented included Fort Novosel, Fort Benning, Redstone Arsenal, and Maxwell Air Force Base. Leaders from Maxwell and the State Department of Veterans Affairs spoke about the importance of community partnership with the military.
We're opening our doors to the installation and partnering our local community members with military commanders. The focus of the 42nd Air Base Wing highlights a commitment to operational readiness, medical preparedness, and resilience building. We continue to fulfill our historic role as pioneers of our great nation. Our competitors recognize us as a force to be reckoned with. We are the installation for cultivating advanced leadership, the epicenter for tactical air operations and education, the strategic hub for joint air operations.
Our primary workforce, our core mission set, it's been around for 80 years. It's the reason why we were formed 80 years ago, is to help our veterans with their federal benefits. We have veteran service officers throughout our state in 61 of our counties. Their primary service is to you, the veterans, to get you the benefits that you deserve. The challenges we have with our veteran service officers out in the field is the federal VA is always constantly changing, so we've got to stay on top of the game. We've got to stay on top of our customer service.
It was the House's turn to take up the closely watched PBM bill today. PBM stands for Pharmacy Benefit Managers, and they are the subject of legislation seeking to reform the business they do with local pharmacies, who say the disparities in drug prices are driving them out of business. Senate Bill 252 from State Senator Billy Beasley would require those pharmacy benefit managers to pay pharmacies more for the drugs they sell, including a $10.64 dispensing fee, the same as Medicaid reimbursement. Many in the business community had opposed the bill, saying it would raise health care costs for businesses and consumers. But several amendments were added along the way to address some of those concerns. In the end, the vote was unanimous, with Representative Philip Rigsby carrying the bill in the House.
As a pharmacist, I lost a pharmacy in February of 23 to this issue. And it was hard work to get the education done. There was a lot of grassroots effort. I had a bill last year that kind of failed miserably, but what it did do is brought a lot of awareness to the issue. HB 348 last year had a lot of misinformation around it. I was glad we came back this year after an off-season, legislative off-season, where we had discussions. We continued the discussion, we continued the education, and we let the people of Alabama know what the issue was. Pharmacies were under a gag clause. We could not discuss with our patients the plight that they were facing. Senate Bill 252 removes that. So not only do we get fair reimbursement, we also can have fair conversation now. And so I was really excited to be a part of this.
A few hours later, the Senate took up the amended version of the bill and gave it final passage, sending the PBM legislation to the governor's desk. Senate President Pro Tem Garland Gudger noted how rare it is for something so controversial to pass unanimously in both chambers.
This has been a win for the people of Alabama. It's been a huge win for community pharmacies in the state of Alabama who just want to be able to go to work, be able to make a living, and take care of their patients. I've been fighting this fight since the late 80s, and this is a big day. I'm so excited. I'm so proud of each and every one of you here.
Everyone had a win-win, and so just to name the people that have come to the table, right? This has been bipartisan. Democrats, Republicans, Blue Cross Blue Shield, BCA, PHIP, RSA, independent pharmacists, community pharmacists, chain pharmacists, and the whole body for the Alabama State Senate and the House of Representatives, and it passed unanimous on both floors. That's amazing, and I'm thankful that this is how government is supposed to work when we all work together. So thank you, Senator Beasley, for passing this, and I'm excited about today and that this just happens.
Another big controversial health care bill was in committee today. House Bill 477 from State Representative David Faulkner would allow the Alabama Farmers Federation to sell health care coverage to its members. Alpha says health insurance premiums have become simply unaffordable for many farmers, especially since they are not subsidized by a larger employer. Blue Cross and the American Cancer Society have opposed the bill, arguing that the lack of regulations would leave consumers unprotected. Multiple amendments were added to the bill in committee today, including one that would give the Alabama Department of Insurance jurisdiction to regulate those plans.
Unfortunately, health care in this country, I think we all know, is rising, and it's taken up bigger and bigger shares of people's income. And if your employer's not paying it and you're paying it out of your pocket, it's tough to do. So what has happened is, I mean, there's 5 other states considering this now and 10 that have it, and it's lowering people's health care premiums and lowering what they're having to spend on health care. So you take a farmer, that's why this is going to be offered, why the members of the Farmers Federation are so excited about this, is an opportunity to lower their health care cost, and it's proven that it's doing so, and it's not adversely affecting other people in other states. So can we give them the option to do that for their members? And in the process, people, yes, there might be people who join the Farmers Federation to try to have this option, but that's the reason for it. It's the cost of health care for people that are not on employer-sponsored health plan.
The amended bill was approved by the committee and now goes to the full House. It is expected on the floor Thursday. We reported last week on a dust-up in committee between State Senator Chris Elliott and State Senator Greg Albritton over how local sales tax dollars are allocated for schools in Baldwin County. The legislation appeared to be dead after committee members voted to set it aside, or at least that's what I said. Today, Senator Elliott said, "Not so fast, my friend." Elliott, who chairs the Senate County and Municipal Government Committee, brought up Senate Bill 270 for consideration and passed it by a voice vote. The bill would change how local sales tax dollars for education are distributed in Baldwin County for cities like Gulf Shores and Orange Beach, who split away from the Baldwin County school system.
I'm going to ask for a long roll call on everything that we do on this. But I would suggest.
I understand. I'm going to get to you here just in a second.
But I would suggest, and in particularly, you're not the only senator representing Baldwin County.
No, not at all. Not at all. But I am the only senator that represents all 3 of these school systems. Is that a fair statement?
I would suggest that you represent the 2 systems. The 3rd system is a small part on the southern end. I got 70% of the county.
Okay, Senator Albritton.
The bill now goes to the full Senate, where Albritton has threatened to filibuster if it comes up on the floor. Actually, he made good on that threat early today. Albritton held the mic and filibustered for the better part of an hour, in part to protest what happened in committee today. After business finally got moving in the Senate, lawmakers took up legislation regarding the age of consent for medical decisions. Senate Bill 101 from State Senator Larry Stutz originally sought to raise the age of medical consent from 14 to 18, but the bill got amended on the floor to raise the age to just 16. Age of consent in this context means a minor could give consent to participate in school counseling, donate bone marrow, or determine the presence of a pregnancy.
Now, when I say that the age of medical consent is 18, that's for general medical consent. And many of those states have carve-outs for pregnancy, for exception for this, exception for that. And the bill that I have here, SB 101, has that exact same thing. It has multiple carve-outs. If you're living independently, if you're married, if you're pregnant, all those things are in the bill. If it's an emergency situation, that's all in the bill already.
To me, 18 is kind of like a little bit, it's a higher number based on where children, not children, young adults are today. And so, you know, in committee, as we discussed this, we felt that a good compromise between 14 and 18 was 16.
When they turned 16, they had to drive to school. I worked all the time. My wife worked all the time. And I felt this was just a little bit onerous to take that age up to 18. So not only on the child, but also on perhaps the doctors.
That bill passed 18 to 12 and now goes to the House. Attorney General Steve Marshall was the keynote speaker at the Montgomery Kiwanis Club today. He took the opportunity to offer an update on the Metro Crime Suppression Unit that has been at work reducing gun violence here in the capital city. Last month, the legislature passed a bill allowing for expanding that program to other cities also facing gun crime.
And maybe the first part of my speech is to really share some good news, which is Montgomery is uniquely positioned to be able to help our victims in ways that you don't see across the state. And it truly has been the outpouring of support from those that live here that have a fundamental right to just feel safe in their own homes and on their own streets and in their own communities, that want to bring that value to everyone in our city, that have embraced what it is that we've been trying to do. 318 arrests, 27 of which have been juveniles. We've seized countless amounts of illegal drugs, 215 firearms, had over 2,600 traffic stops, 784 arrest warrants served, 105 machine gun conversion devices, Glock switches you may have heard about, 57 stolen cars recovered, and 84 vehicle pursuits, many of which resulted in the arrest of those with pending felonies. Y'all, that's remarkable. But we ought to take this week to just reflect on the fact that as we talk about the violent crime issue in the city, sometimes we get immersed in statistics. We talk about numbers, but let's also remember that for every one of those victims that we hear about in the news, they were a son or a daughter, they may have been a husband or a wife, and clearly a friend to many. And while numbers matter, it's the tangible lives that we lost that we need to think about. And again, I think Montgomery is uniquely equipped to be able to do it.
When we come back, I'll sit down with State Representative Ed Oliver. Stay with us.
You can watch past episodes of Capital Journal online at video.aptv.org. Capital Journal episodes are also available on APTV's free mobile app. You can also connect with Capital Journal and link to past episodes on Capital Journal's Facebook page. And you can listen to past episodes of Capital Journal when you're driving or on the go with Capital Journal podcasts. Keep up with what's happening with Capital Journal.
Since 1997, Alabama Public Television has provided programs, services, and resources to child care professionals, teachers, and parents. Visit aptv.org/education to learn more.
Welcome back to Capital Journal. Joining me next is State Representative Ed Oliver from Dadeville. Mr. Oliver, thanks for coming on the show.
Nice to be here.
Well, it's Military Day. Y'all had Military Day on the House floor.
Always a big event. Both houses, joint session, a lot of distinguished visitors representing every major installation in the state.
That's what it looked like. So talk about the significance of Military Day. For as long as I've been paying attention, this has been an ongoing tradition. House and Senate come together to honor the military.
The House and Senate, we invite representatives from all of the major commands, two-star, generally speaking, to thank them for what they do for our economy and what they do for the people that live in Alabama. You think 22,000 people at Fort Novacell daily go through the gates. 20% of our GDP is behind the fence at Redstone. Fort Benning, same thing. Just a tremendous boon to our economy and opportunities for people to have great jobs and a great place to work. Maxwell Air Force Base right here in Montgomery, it is the heart of the city.
That's right. It really is. I'm glad you mentioned that because too often we take it for granted. It's a huge military footprint. I know that y'all have been passing some bills having to do with the military. Kind of took the theme of the day and turned it into legislation. I know you've got some of these. What are some of the more significant pieces of legislation you're moving?
Well, as chairman of Military and Veterans Affairs, my job is to kind of ride herd on what we call our military package. We have a military package. We work with the Military Stability Commission to come up with legislation to try to make Alabama more friendly for active duty and veterans. We want Alabama to be the place where people want to retire as well. So we will have legislation that we think helps achieve that. For example, the Alabama Code of Military Justice bill that we have. That makes it easier if a kid gets in trouble on a military post and he's got to work with local law enforcement officers, then we make it easier for them to move to their next duty station. That sort of thing. We want it easy they move frequently, every 2 or 3 years. So being able to leave the state or come into the state becomes very important. Another thing that we've done that we think is very important is veterans treatment courts.
Yeah.
There were veteran treatment courts in a few of the circuits in the state. We're moving them into every circuit in the state. We're making sure that you have a veteran services officer assigned to that court. And then we're making sure they're funded well enough to actually decide what to do with these people once you get them in court. Actually, the veteran services officer, what he will do is he'll determine what benefits that service member has. And veterans treatment courts work real well because service members are good at following orders, regardless of what may have befallen them since they've gotten out of the service. They tend to have a real high success rate.
I know the Chief Justice has been involved in some of that.
She has.
And that's really interesting to see the court and the legislature work together to expand. It sounds like a very needed option. Well, that's really interesting, and we'll certainly be following some of those bills. Seem like worthy causes. I wanted to turn to the other part of your committee chairmanship, Veterans Affairs, which has been super active this year. First, talk about the Veterans Resource Center. That was your bill. They couldn't pass it quick enough to get it signed into law. So talk about where that came from and what can we expect once that is up and running.
It came from people outside the legislature identifying a need. Veteran suicide is something that I've actually did the first resolution creating a veteran suicide task force for the legislature 6 years ago, 5 years ago. And that's one of those things that's very difficult to just get figured out. We've had some people outside the legislature that made some recommendations. They came up with a public-private partnership. And the one common denominator in veteran suicide is either being underemployed or unemployed. So meaningful jobs becomes an issue. So that was the first thing that we're taking on to the Veterans Resource Center. Now, educational benefits, all the things that a kid that was 18 when he went on active duty and he comes back when he's 25, well, the military's done everything for him for all that time. So one day he doesn't have that anymore. You don't know where your next meal's coming from. You don't know how to go buy a car tag. All these little things in life that other people were probably learning as they went along. These veterans come back and they need some help transitioning. So, and that transition center will do that for them, the resource center.
How long do you see before it's operational? Because it's kind of a hub and spoke model, right? It'll be a hub here in Montgomery, but you can operate out of the auxiliary office somewhere else, right?
That's true, and the face of the public-private partnership will probably be the Alabama Department of Veterans Affairs. So we don't want to reinvent anything that we already have. So we'll figure out how to use these veteran services organizations and those veteran services officers to be the spokes in that hub.
Absolutely. Well, we want to continue following that so folks know where to go, right?
Sure.
Know where to
Well, the day you come off active duty, somebody takes you by the hand to make sure you have that adjustment into civilian life.
Right. Well, that's good. Let's talk about the other more controversial issue that you dealt with. That is really restructuring the governance structure of the Department of Veterans Affairs. It was unfortunate why this came about. That entire dust-up that was, I think, unfortunate is a nice word. It was pretty ugly at times.
Well, I want to clarify one thing, though. I had started making my plans for this change 3 years ago.
Is that right?
And long before, before any of the dust-up occurred, ADVA had actually made the request that they be elevated to the governor's cabinet.
Huh.
So
well, that part doesn't get told very often.
Those are the parts you really need to get out there. Find the facts.
Okay. Well, that's really interesting because a lot of opposition to the bill acted like this never needs to happen, and it sounds like this has been around for a lot longer than the controversy had been around for.
Listen, I don't take anything away from any of the organizations that have served veterans for 80 years. And remember, the three major veterans organizations, VFW, American Legion, and Disabled Veterans, they are the founders of ADVA.
Right.
So all respect to them. But as you recall, they did support this bill.
Right.
So when you think about it, there's probably a reason.
Oh, sure. And look, I covered it from the very beginning of the ethics complaint and all that. And I can absolutely vouch for you being frustrated over some of the misinformation that was out there about the bill. I remember y'all kept saying, hey, make sure you're reading the updated version of just little things like that. And so I completely hear you. It's not just the dust up that was unfortunate. It was some of the misinformation that had been going around. But now it's law.
Law.
All that's over, and now it's law. Talk about what the new structure will look like and how that will be an improvement for functioning of the department.
Well, we just mentioned that for veteran suicide, we're concerned about jobs. Well, now ADVA sits at the same table with the governor and in the governor's cabinet members. So you've got Greg Reed over at Labor, which is workforce development now. So we are able to tie every cabinet member into whatever resources or assets that we need to be successful in getting veterans placed. Whether it's mental health, whether it's physical health, whether it's education, we're sitting at the table with all the people that have the resources. We're no longer operating as a separate set over here. We're in the big leagues. And
it was kind of weird. It operated just kind of differently than all the other agencies, kind of quasi one foot in, one foot out.
Right.
So this really integrates them into state government.
It does. The opportunity is very great. And now this is when we have to do what we say we were going to do. And for me, that's the most important thing. But now is when the integration part becomes just critical. Are we going to do a better job of serving veterans? Well, yes. That's our mission, is to take these new resources we have and these new assets, and through the face of ADVA, the Alabama Department of Veterans Affairs, and the new commissioner, Jeff Newton, make sure we do a better job of providing services for veterans.
Mm-hmm. We're going to be talking about a lot of this at our breakfast coming up on Thursday, and I hope you're going to be there with Commissioner Newton, with Commissioner Boswell, and the Chief Justice. It's going to be an exciting time. While I have you, I want to turn to Medicaid and specifically your bill on colorectal screening for cancer. I know you've had this issue for a couple of years. Where is this bill in the process? And just can you tell me what the idea behind it is?
Well, it's in the Senate right now. Of course, we passed it out of the House, so we're waiting for them to act on the bill. But it's Cologuard. We want Medicaid to pay for that. And people would say, well, why? Because it costs a lot more to do any other testing than it would do to do the Cologuard, and it would save lives, and it would save us money. And that's the reason, not the only reason, but that's the reason you really couldn't argue why it's a good idea.
Yeah. This is the box that comes to the door.
Yes.
Okay. So you're saying that's cheaper than a colonoscopy?
Certainly.
And a lot cheaper than treating colon cancer.
Sure.
Okay.
And every other state around us does it.
Okay. Well, you still got, 11 legislative days left. Do you think there's time to pass this bill?
I do. I do. I've got all kinds of bills floating around that I'm trying to get to squeeze them through. And I would say that the funnel gets narrower towards the end, and there does come a point where you have to start picking the things that are your favorite child.
Okay.
And that's tough, but I really believe that bill should pass.
Right. Yeah. Bottleneck in the Senate is no surprise. We're out of time. Thank you so much for coming on, and we'll be following these bills.
Thank you for having me.
We'll be right back.
Launched in retaliation for the attack on Creek warriors by territorial militia at Burnt Corn Creek, on August 30th, 1813, a force of about 700 Creek Indians destroyed Fort Mims in the first major battle of the Creek War of 1813-14. The massacre of civilians rallied U.S. armies under the cry, "Remember Fort Mims," and the ensuing Creek War culminated in the Creek Nation's subsequent cession of over 21 million acres of land.
That's our show for tonight. Thanks for watching. We'll be back tomorrow night at the same time with more coverage of the Alabama legislature right here on Alabama Public Television. For our Capital Journal team, I'm Todd Stacy. We'll see you next time.